What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Barely Qualified Picks. I've got my man Nate back on the show. We are excited to talk about 5 burning topics today as we inch closer to the college football playoff on Thursday and Friday. We have Ole Miss and we have Miami on Thursday. And then on Friday, we have the Big Ten juggernaut matchup of Oregon and Indiana. And then we roll into a massive wild card weekend. We've talked about how wide open the AFC is. That probably is a little unfair to the NFC, which is just as wide open when you look at a lot of these matchups. There are some surprising spreads in there. One of the 5 burning topics, I want to know who your upset alert choice is for this week. There are a few, kind of pick 'em spreads, but then there are some other spreads that are meaty. And do we think it could be the 49ers who spring an upset on the Eagles? Could it be the Chargers who spring an upset on the Patriots? So we'll get into that and more. Where I would like to start with you today, our first big topic of the week, the NFL awards. We've gotten through the entire regular season, and we're starting to see some of the tertiary awards come out, right? Like not the NFL's awards, but those other groups that, name different players and give out different awards. And so we're starting to see signals. And with the MVP, I'm still really uncertain which way it's going to go. Is it going to be Matt Stafford from the Rams, or is it going to be Drake May? Question 1 is, who do you think it's going to be? But then the more important question is, after watching 18 weeks of football, who is your MVP this year?
It's first off, great to be here. Excited that my mic is actually going to be working this time, not coming through the potato on the phone. But I mean, to me, there's no question that Matt Stafford is the MVP. Do I love that he's an MVP candidate? Not a ton. I feel like it's kind of like the Heisman race this year where you don't really love any of the candidates and none of the candidates feel right. But 46 touchdowns, really hard to beat. You're in the playoffs. Okay, the team has looked good, but I think the problem and why people don't like Matt Stafford this year for MVP is some of his losses have kind of been on the biggest stage. They've been embarrassing losses where they have complete control of the game and give it up against the Falcons and against the Seahawks in the last couple, or maybe not against the Falcons. I kind of had to do some digging out of things to kind of make that work out. But it's just things haven't looked good on the biggest stage for Matt Stafford. But when Carolina was a really ugly loss. But when you wind everything out, and again, you look at that's 46 touchdowns. I can't remember, 3,700 yards. And to me, Drake May, as great as he was and as great as the story as the Patriots are, 31 touchdowns isn't going to get it done for me.
And it's 31 touchdowns against the worst strength of schedule in 25 years. If this was, hey, they had the easiest schedule of 2025, I would look at that completely differently than they played the worst schedule in 25 years. And when you go through it, and I think about, and I know everybody's going to look at this differently, but I think about if you would have swapped these players on these teams, I think the Rams are better with Matt Stafford than they would have been with Drake May, especially going through that gauntlet
No doubt.
the NFC West. And I think Matt Stafford would have done probably just as well with the weapons in New England as Drake May did this year against that schedule. I agree with you that, 31 touchdowns, like you have to look at the numbers. You just have to. It's about performance. And those touchdowns add up to wins. Sometimes you're blowing teams out, but you know how this is. When you actually look at a team's schedule, most games are a touchdown or less. And so when you're talking about the difference between 46 and 31 touchdowns, 15 touchdowns is a lot of influence one player is having over their team's outcomes. And look, yes, the Rams ended up as, what are they, the 6 seed? They're the 5 seed? I get them and the 49ers confused how that all shook out.
The 5 seed. Yep.
But they easily could have been the 1 seed. You and I talked about this, that Rams-Seahawks game. That ball could have bounced a couple different ways. It could have been the Rams game, and then we're having a completely different conversation today.
Entirely.
So I agree. It should be Matt Stafford, and it's not even just because I'm 41 years old and I'm impressed as hell that somebody Matt Stafford's age. Dude, he was drafted in 2008. When you look at the top quarterbacks this year, there's 2008, and then the next group was like 2018. It's crazy.
Yeah, and again, for him to still be doing it at this age and slinging it and being a kingmaker, you think about Megatron. Now, Megatron, I think with any any quarterback would have been amazing. But you think about Kenny Galladay and DJ Shark. I think we talked about this last time. Those guys had their best years of their career with Matt Stafford. He immediately gets to the Rams, career cup or Cooper Cup, has a career year Triple Crown winner, and now you've got Puka Nacua. Like there's just no missing with Matt Stafford because of the way he plays the game, and because he comes from that earlier 2000s in the before the 2010s, before offenses really started to trend college quick game. He's much more experienced in setting his protection, figuring out where the ball needs to go. And again, you get that experience. You know what kind of pressure is coming to you. Tom Brady talked about this all the time. There's no defense that anybody can run that has me confused. Now, you accompany that with his arm talent, the experience, the weapons that he has. It's just almost impossible to stop him from getting the football exactly where he wants it to go. And again, you've got Sean McVay, an offensive wizard. Like that pairing is excellent. And to me is no-brainer MVP. Again, it doesn't feel right because Mahomes wasn't in the conversation. Josh Allen played his way out of it. Lamar Jackson had an injury-riddled year. I'm trying to think of who else is out there. Joe Burrow, right? All of the cream of the crop of the AFC quarterbacks like didn't have a great year. Jordan Love, who people thought maybe was going to have a chance this year, injured late in the year, but also played really inconsistently like he tends to do throughout the season. And so you eliminate all these other guys, and then you kind of break down the rest of the factors in the NFC. Like there wasn't going to be really anybody else to point to other than Matt Stafford. Brock Purdy maybe, but he missed time also. By default, it's Matt Stafford.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, you mentioned Brock Purdy, and for as great as that Niners offense has played over the last several weeks, there's no doubt they were humming coming into week 18. The Seattle defense shut he and CMC and that offense down, and that's something that they could not do to the Rams. Puka Nacua ran through the Seattle defense, and that was without Devontae Adams. You meet again in the playoffs, that could look very differently. And that's actually a great segue into the second award, which is Offensive Player of the Year. You will probably have a good guess which direction I'm going to go with this one. But I'm curious, who is your Offensive Player of the Year in 2025?
It is definitely not Jackson Smith-Njigba. It's Christian McCaffrey. 17 touchdowns, over 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards rushing. Like this guy did everything for the Niners team. While everyone else on that team had missed time at some point. Brock Purdy missed time. Mac Jones, I think, even got injured at some point. Who else got injured? George Kittle in and out of games. Juwan Jennings in and out of games. Ricky Pearsall in it. Like, who do you look to get the ball to keep your offensive? None other than Christian McCaffrey. To put that kind of load on him after everyone thought his career was over last year. How are you going to come back from these strange Achilles calf injuries? They weren't being very clear about him. Apparently, they replaced him, and now they're amazing. But he is your offensive player of the year without a doubt. There's no other argument, and I like Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he's incredible. But there's just no other answer this year than Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, I hate that you went that way because I was trying to set you up for a head fake. I was going to push you in the direction of Jackson Smith-Njigba, and then I was going to take CMC because what he did this year is incredible. Yeah. He stayed healthy. He led the league in scrimmage yards. To your point, I mean, he went through two different quarterbacks. George Kittle was out for most of the season. You may have just said this, and maybe I missed it. Brandon Ayuk was supposed to play.
I didn't even mention it. He's
never even came back, and he was the most expensive receiver on the roster this year in San Francisco. And it all worked because of Christian McCaffrey. And a lot of credit to Trent Williams, and that was a huge loss for Trent Williams not to play in Week 18 against Seattle.
That was tough.
Definitely. But Christian McCaffrey was unreal this year, and there are not that many running backs who you can rely on like that. Now, what is next year going to look like? Christian McCaffrey's year this year is reminiscent in many ways to what Saquon did last year. But you got to give it to Christian McCaffrey. I would actually, and I hate to say this, I would have JSN third because I think Puka Nacua was the better receiver this year. I think he benefited from having Devontae Adams across from him. But when you look at the numbers, they both put up such big numbers that it almost becomes less about numbers to me, and it becomes more about when I watched the game of football this year, who felt more dominant. And when I watched games with Puka Nacua, and part of that is just his size, but the way that he moves at his size, it's freakish. It's just freakish. It was like Shaq's footwork around the basket, Puka Nacua, and the way that he takes hits and gets back up. He runs every route on the route tree. So yeah, for me, it would have actually been CMC 1, Puka 2, JSN 3, and all of
Sam
that.
Darnold 4. I'm kidding.
JSN was the thing that happened in Seattle, and nothing else really happened. The running game never happened. The tight ends had moments. Cooper Kupp never really happened, although he has come on over the last few weeks, traded for Rashid Shaheed, and it took several weeks until he started making an impact. But all that seems to be happening now. It makes me feel good for Seattle, depending on who comes to town in the divisional round. But okay, so Offensive Player of the Year. Who do you have for Defensive Player of the Year? Is there any real discussion here? Like, is there an argument that it can't be Myles Garrett because Cleveland sucked? Even acknowledging that their defense didn't suck, their offense sucked, which put their defense in a lot of hard positions.
Yeah, it's gotta be Myles Garrett. You break the sack record, you win Defensive Player of the Year. Like, there's no other way around it.
Do you actually give him full? Like, for me, he has the Saxterisk record, right? There's an asterisk. Saxterisk. It looks better.
So him and Jared Allen.
Yeah, I mean, Strahan did it in 16 games, and it was a little disappointing for me that Myles Garrett, it was like game 14 when he could have broken the record, and then he had that dry spell, and he does finally get it. And unlike Strahan's sack of Favre, where Favre audibles out of a run into a pass and then lays down for Strahan when he gets the record, like, at least this one was a legitimate sack, but it is a little bit tough for me, If this was the NBA and you played one more game, this is the NFL. 17 games versus 16 matters.
It absolutely matters. And again, are your sacks actually impacting the success of your team? And I think early in the year that Browns defense was a lot better. And I think as the season wore on and the offense just really couldn't get anything going, it gets exhausting for a defense to try and shoulder the load every single week. And I think the difference is the Denver Broncos, right? Early in the year, the offense wasn't spectacular, but as it started to come on, and especially start to come on late in the fourth quarter, you get inspired and it keeps you going throughout the rest of the year. Speaking of the Broncos, you can maybe mention
Nick Benito,
linebacker Benito. Yeah, you can maybe mention Benito. He's another guy who's up there. To me, I think
faded, started really strong but faded.
Fair.
Who I think is most unfortunate is Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. That you had these two incredible edge rushers in Houston that are taking both away from each other.
Yeah, but I mean, are they taking away from each other, or are they helping each other out?
Well, I think both.
Because who do you slide to?
Right. I mean, you can't. Right. That's one of the things that makes the defense so dangerous.
Yeah, and then you got Al-Shaair on that back end. Like, good luck. And again, I think we talked about that last time with some of these late in the season matchups. But again, by default, kind of similar to our Matt Stafford situation for MVP, it goes to Myles Garrett. And it's hard to argue otherwise because of the record. But it just feels like the sack record can be broken every year.
Because I want to talk about Offensive Rookie of the Year next. And it sounds like Tet McMillan is going to get it because he was the only running back or receiver in this rookie class that cracked 1,000 yards, and he just barely did set the rookie receiving yardage mark. And yet he was like mid-20s in the league, 30s when it came to receptions and yards. His overall year wasn't that great. And when I look at Tyler Shuck was just announced today that New Orleans is going to ride him in 2026. Freaking duh. Of course they are. Tyler Shuck looked awesome. He took over a team from Spencer Rattler that was supposed to tank for a quarterback in this draft, and he just wouldn't let it happen. Tyler Shuck, former Duck, so I have some love for him. Dude is tough. He made all of the throws. He brought Chris Olave back to life. He dealt with a running back situation where it was Kamara one day, it was Neal another day, it was Audric Estime to finish the season. He made the most of what he had. He brought a lot of inspiration and fight to that team. And, I said when they were like 4-10, then 5-10, then 6-10, they were playing like a 10-4, 10-5 team, that kind of mindset. And so for me, You can make an argument for Jackson Dart, who was in and out of the lineup with a lot of injuries, and he did show some flashes, but I don't look at Jackson Dart's rookie year and go, he has a long career ahead of him in the league. I do see that with Tyler Shuck, and I just think that Tyler Shuck had a more impressive rookie year. What you ask of a quarterback is different. And so before I'm going to let you go in just a second, but the last argument would be he came in midway through the year, and in any other position, I would say that's a totally fair argument. But at quarterback, where you didn't get number one snaps in camp, you didn't get it in preseason, you didn't get it to start the year, you're actually at a much steeper disadvantage coming into the quarterback position mid-year and then finding a way to flourish than you are if you're a running back filling in for an injured starter or a receiver or an edge rusher or what have you. So for me, it should be Tyler Shuck, but it looks like just based on the prediction markets that it's a done deal. It's Ted McMillan.
I don't think it should be either of them, to be honest with you. I think it should be Ashton Jonty. Who endured more garbage than Ashton Jonty this year and to still put up the numbers he did with his physicality getting the football? At first, Chip Kelly didn't even want to give him the football to start the year. And then they can Chip Kelly, and then you're still trying to get him acclimated to the offense. Pete Carroll's out the door. Clearly an insane amount of dysfunction.
Did you see the article on Pete Carroll's sons this week?
No, talk to me about that.
Pete Carroll's sons this year were the offensive line coach and the assistant quarterbacks coach. And there was an ESPN report that came out, I want to say yesterday, and it was talking about how the offensive line coach son, I can't remember their names, he had no idea what he was doing, and he would run them through drills, but he wouldn't tell them what the purpose of the drills were or whether they were succeeding or not. And it got to a point where there was so much dysfunction that the offensive line were going straight to Geno Smith and Ashton Jonty to try and understand what they needed them to do better. The coaching was just checked out completely. So actually, great argument in favor of what was Ashton Jonty supposed to do in that dumpster fire of an offense. I mean, and then you had the report, God love Chip Kelly if you do or you don't, but that he was messing up his calls, and I had sent a couple of group chat texts on that, and I was like, drunk Uncle Chip just couldn't keep it together. What is going on here?
Hey, the water's different in Vegas because it's not water. All right, it's alcohol.
It may look clear.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's distractions in Vegas, I guess, and maybe that gets the best of coaches and players and organizations as a whole when they're there. Maybe that franchise is never going to succeed there, but it makes you really go back now, appreciate Derek Carr, how much he was really doing for that franchise for so long, trying to hold it together before ultimately his own wheels fell off. But again, like you said, that adds to my argument why I think it's Ashton Jonty, what he was able to endure, and what he put together from both a receiving end and being a running back on that team. Brock Bowers being injured part of the year. They traded away their best wide receiver, Jacoby Myers. Geno Smith I don't know whether the offense was his fault or not, but whatever the case is, it's things were not good, and he still had a hell of a season. What I do like about Tyler Shuck, high completion percentage. If you come into the NFL halfway through the year and you can throw honestly, just north of 60% is great. But I think he might have been north of 65% as a passer. Now, the games that he won, I think, the Titans, the Jets, the Panthers,
beat the Panthers,
beat the Bucks. I mean, technically, the Panthers are a playoff team, so I can't slight them very much. But I'm not necessarily impressed with the wins, but I am impressed with the way that he came in and played. I just don't think it was offensive rookie of the year worthy play.
That's fair.
And maybe that conversation is different if he gets to start the season, right? Kind of like Drake May last year, where a similar situation where you don't come in until partway through the year, so then you don't quite get the same amount of love, even though you look really, really good. It's kind of the same situation that happened to Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, fair. All right. Defensive rookie of the year. This is one that, there is an odds-on favorite. It's Carson Schwessinger. He's had a great year. For me, it's a little tough because I'm going to have a homer pick on this one. I think it's Nick Emenwari. Nick Emenwari has been incredible. And unlike Carson Schwessinger, who played for the Browns, a team that, again, was not very good, Nick Emenwari changed the complexion of the Seahawks defense. No team played with 6 defensive backs in that dime formation more than the Seahawks. And the reason why they did that is because it was really a nickel. Because Nick Emenwari can play safety, he can play nickel back, he can play linebacker. When you have a guy that can flex into all of those different positions, you're never really in a dime. At least the concept of a dime that can be easily run against, because you have these lightweight defensive backs that are trying to take on these heavy blocks. The Seahawks are able to thrive in a dime package because of Nick Emenwari, and he has just been a revelation this year. So I totally respect everything Schlesinger did, but for me, it's Emenwari. Do you have your own dark horse?
I do think it was Emenwari as well, and I knew that I was worried because I knew you might have homered on that Seattle side of things, but I think Emenwari has ended up being what they wanted Jamal Adams to be.
Yes.
A guy
100%.
who can play in the box, he can cover, he can match up on tight ends. You know, he can match up on most receivers. There's going to be a few elite receivers he's just not going to have a chance on in the slot. But his ability to play so many different positions that doesn't necessarily give away the coverage. A lot of times that happens, right? Like a guy comes in, a nickel safety comes in, a dime safety comes in. Okay, like I know that they're only going to run 1, maybe 2 coverages out of this. You slide a guy in motion, it's like, okay, I know exactly what they're doing. But when you have him on the field, it makes it so much more difficult for an offense to pick and choose where they want to go with the football, because you're not necessarily giving up a mismatch. And again, I think he had 80 finished the season with over 80 tackles. For that, as a safety, means he's sticking his nose in there. He's not just trying to dip back and cover and, you know, be a rangy guy. Like, he is getting in the place and making tackles, and that's exactly the kind of defense that Mike McDonald wants, right?
100%.
You know,
Fly to the ball.
Right, and that's what he had with Kyle Hamilton when he was in Baltimore. RIP Baltimore for not moving on from Harbaugh and not picking him up. But that's the kind of safety that you want, and I expect to see him grow more over the next couple of years, and having 2 strong corners on the outside of him with Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen, guys who are going to continue to grow in their own right. You just have a long, rangy back end that's going to make it very uncomfortable for quarterbacks to put the ball into windows.
It is.
I kind of started talking about the larger Hawks defense there, but I think Emenwari,
yeah.
Emenwari, I think that he's right up there again, but it's hard to beat 156 tackles.
Yeah. It really is.
It's really hard to beat that. But then again, now I'm going to say
defense was on the field all the time.
Defense was on the field all the time. You're also playing behind Myles Garrett, who's causing a lot of chaos and disruption, a lot of focus on him. So how many more free tackles are you getting potentially? I don't know. Didn't watch a lot of Browns football this year, if I'm being honest. I don't think anybody did. I think it's Emenwari.
All right, so I want to ask you one more player award, and then let's talk about Coach of the Year, because I think that's a great conversation. The player award is Comeback Player of the Year. This one, it looks like across the prediction markets, Christian McCaffrey has locked up. I can understand why. But for me, when we're talking about a Comeback Player of the Year, we're talking about somebody who's been down, who we've been down on, that has bounced back in a big way, that has changed the way we view the player, potentially long term. And with Christian McCaffrey, he came back from injury. But, did anybody think he wasn't going to be Christian McCaffrey so long as he stayed healthy? For me, the Comeback Player of the Year is Trevor Lawrence, and it's not even close. I mean, we thought Trevor Lawrence 4 years in was he was bust. He was not going to work out, and he's leading one of the best offenses in the league this year. Argue a case for Christian McCaffrey or somebody else over Trevor Lawrence being the player who has reshaped perception of him more than any other with his season this year.
I really enjoy Trevor Lawrence, and I was a Trevor Lawrence defender until about late last season. I said, this is his last year. He's finally getting an offensive head coach who's proven to be not just effective as a quarterback's coach when he was underneath Canales in Tampa Bay, but then he gets an offensive coordinator job. Baker has another great season. I'm like, okay, there's a chance here for Trevor Lawrence to finally have things go his way. And it did, right? As soon as you put actual structure around him, how many coaches, offensive coordinators, and how much change was around him his entire first 4 years. First 4 years. Like, it's hard to find success when your offense is changing, the personnel in the building is changing, and there's not a winning culture. And Liam Cohen, Duval, he came in and kind of changed the nature of that team and how they play and the physicality. They play with more intent now and a clear identity. So again, I see why Trevor Lawrence, but to me, and it makes me sick to say this, a guy that we were down on, a guy that we've disliked, a guy that didn't really have a few, Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, I can't.
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron, I can't.
I can't listen. I can't either. But his offensive coordinator is football terrorist Arthur Smith. Okay, who's had
That's fair.
2 good years as an offensive coordinator, both with prime Derrick Henry. Okay, the only time, and then one of those years they had prime AJ Brown. Nothing worked in Atlanta, and hardly anything has worked with any quarterback at all these last 2 years, other than with Aaron Rodgers. They had no consistent or semblance of a run game. Your best wide receiver, DK Metcalf, sometimes just checks out or can't stay focused on the game and makes things extracurricular. Often. And so, honestly, your most consistent target is Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah.
But
and
Arthur
Kenneth
Smith,
Gainwell out of the backfield.
Kenneth Gainwell out of the backfield. But yeah, you just did not have there was nothing consistent about the offense other than Aaron Rodgers finding ways to kind of score enough points to win games. Now, I don't think they're a spectacular team. I'm worried about them in this first round of the playoffs, although I do think that they have a chance to win just because the game is in Pittsburgh. It's late in the season. You can't really rule it out. But again, I just think Aaron Rodgers, with a lot against him in Pittsburgh, again, the biggest games of the year, DK Metcalf not available, I'm impressed. I see the argument for Trevor Lawrence. I agree with you that I don't think Christian McCaffrey can fall into coming back player of the year because he played at the end of last year, if I'm correct, right? So like he's not really like coming back. So that's how I see it. He came back. So did every other player who played some snaps last year. They came back.
That's totally fair. Aaron Rodgers would not get my vote, but I don't begrudge him getting your vote with that argument.
And I don't like it. I don't like to even have those words come out of my mouth. I'm a prideful guy.
Can I say one thing back on Trevor Lawrence before we move on?
Talk to me.
You talked about the constant change that he underwent in his first 4 seasons in the league, and that is so true. The irony of this year, my brother had pointed this out. They actually gambled on a big change mid-season and bringing in Jacoby Myers when they lost Travis Hunter and then BTJ was out for a few games. And Jacoby Myers has maybe been a skeleton key for this offense that has taken pressure off BTJ, that has given Parker Washington room to run. He's had a very good season, given Brenton Strange, now that he's back, space in the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge move that they made that a lot of teams don't make midseason in the NFL, and boy, they've been rewarded for it. I was really skeptical of that move.
I wasn't skeptical. I knew it was necessary, but what version were you going to get out of Jacoby Myers? Because Jacoby Myers could have been worn out from the Patriots, worn out from Vegas. Like, are you getting a guy that wants to check out for the rest 100%. Of the season? Or are you going to get a guy that wants to, dive in and say, hey, we can win this? And I'll bet you he was checked out till he showed up for the first practice and Trevor Lawrence started throwing darts and he was like, oh, wait, hold on. This guy's for real.
Yeah.
And again, when you've got a guy like Jacoby Myers, he's not a small receiver. He's not, who's a big receiver? He's not a DK Metcalf, but he's certainly not an Amon-Ra St. Brown. He sits somewhere in between. Yeah. He's got great size to play in the slot. He can play outside. He's played both roles throughout his career. And again, it does take that pressure off of your Brian Thomas Jr. At one point was your only target to start the year. And it allowed and bought time for your Parker Washingtons and Brenton Strange to come on and for Trevor Lawrence to kind of build that trust. I'm not sure if Travis Hunter is coming back for the playoffs at all, or his ankle injury must have been way worse than they were leading on because they've been real silent about it. But
even if he's coming back in the defensive secondary, you'd think that there would be a benefit to that.
To me, he should have come in 100% as a corner, but that's a whole other topic. He should have 100% just been an NFL corner. So I like that addition of Jacoby Myers, and I like the way he responded to being traded. He got out and he ended up in a better situation, and I don't think he thought it was going to be that way.
Agreed. All right, last award, Coach of the Year. Tell me why it shouldn't be Mike Macdonald, 15-2 on the road over the last 2 years, led the Seahawks to the number 1 seed, which nobody thought was going to happen before the year started. I appreciate what Mike Vrabel did, but if we're making an argument that what Matt Stafford did was more impressive, given all of the context, than what Drake May did against the easiest schedule in 25 years. Why doesn't that hold up for the Mikes in the Coach of the Year race?
I really thought you were going to go Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel here. And I'll tell you who my pick is here in a second, but I'll tell you why it's not Ben Johnson. I'll tell you why it's not Mike Vrabel. Neither of those guys had the pressure to win right away. Both of those teams could have gone 6-11, 7-10, right? Just shown improvement. And you said, okay, things are trending in the right direction. We're feeling really positive about the team, blah, blah, blah. But they went out and won games with zero expectation. And again, both players and both teams got better throughout the season. More so for the Bears, I think. Maybe the wheels fell off a little bit towards the end of the season. Got a little bit high and mighty on their own juice. But to me, the Coach of the Year is Mike Macdonald. And it's not because of how he coached them this year per se, but I respect what he did in the offseason. As a defensive head coach, if the offense is not good, you are screwed. Raheem Morris got screwed because he was unable to put a great offensive mind around him. Zach Robinson, horrible offensive coordinator for 2 years. And he allowed him to waste what is an incredible amount of talent on that Atlanta offense. This juggling back and forth between Michael Penix Jr. and Kirk Cousins, both now having suffered some pretty major injuries. But he didn't protect himself. Mike Macdonald, 1 year, Ryan Grubb was like, this guy ain't working. I'm going to get him out. DK Metcalf wants to argue and cry, get him out. I don't care what it costs us to get rid of him. He's just not going to be on the team. And we will figure out a way to make this receiving core successful. A lot of people were looking at Shane Waldron and what Ryan Grubb had made out of Jackson Smith and Jigba and made him look like a not excellent wide receiver. And everyone's like, okay, so now you've got no wide receivers. Oh, now you're going to bring in Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold, the guy that Minnesota didn't even want, who can't hold it together at the end of the year. He's like, no, I trust this guy. I know the guys that I have around me. You go bring in Clint Kubiak, one of the newer minds.
Sounds might be out the door for another head coaching job.
Right, but he made every decision necessary in the offseason to say, this is the direction we're taking this team. Either get on the bus or get off. And if you're not driving the bus very well or doing your part, I'm kicking you off and I'm bringing somebody else on.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of energy.
For the first time in years.
Identity. And
McDonald.
And as much as people were frustrated with kind of how they were going back and forth with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, I thought he coached Clint Kubiak through that, and they found a great balance there. But again, just the way that defense played, so physical, so downhill, all of the defensive backs and corners coming down into the box to make tackles. That's how you don't give up big chunk plays. Because when a running back gets to the second level, you don't have that backside corner pursuing. 8 yards turns into 30. 30 yards turns into a touchdown. But everybody being bought in on the defensive side. And you saw it last year too. And people were frustrated with how the Seahawks closed last year. I couldn't be more excited for the future of the Seahawks. And I thought Mike Macdonald should certainly be Coach of the Year. I understand if Vrabel gets it, right? He turned an absolute dumpster fire into a successful winning team. Ben Johnson, everyone said Caleb Williams was a bust. He's like, no, actually, I think he's pretty good. So you could argue him, and then Liam Cohen too. You could argue all of those guys completely turned around the franchises, and you said it, identity. Each one of those teams has an identity, and any playoff team right now that has a chance of winning has an identity. To me, Eagles, no identity. That's why I'm concerned for them. Packers, no identity. Josh Jacobs was your identity. He gets a little bit dinged up. Jordan Love out, in, not really sure. Where does your identity lie? Who else? The Panthers probably shouldn't even be in the playoffs somehow.
Yeah.
No identity. The people who gave it up to him, the team that did, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, no identity throughout the year. And so that tends to be the key is, can your coach get everybody rowing the boat in the same direction?
All right, Nate, that is the perfect segue into the second big topic, which is who's got the worst situation in the league coming out of their season. And I think it almost has to be the Jets. Convince me it's not the Jets. You look at Las Vegas, and yes, it's been a bad year. They just fired Carroll and a lot of the coaching staff. But they got the number one pick. They've got 10 total draft picks in the 2026 draft. They have $100 million in cap room, and they're in Vegas. The Jets are the Jets. They finished the year with Brady Cook at quarterback. Garrett Wilson was their leading receiver, and I think he last played in week 6. The Jets are an absolute dumpster fire and insult to injury. I mentioned this to you over text. The Jets were the first team since 1933 not to record a single interception on the season. I mean, when we think about having a bad year and then what prospects look like for the coming year, does anybody have it worse than the Jets?
It's certainly hard to argue. Yeah, I don't know. And you gave up so much for Aaron Rodgers a couple years ago, which further delayed your ability to move this team forward and in the right direction. You've continued to make coaching changes. You thought Robert Saleh, for some reason, was the problem. He was not the problem. And
No.
you've just dug your hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what bad franchises do. Bad franchises continue to make bad decisions. And until somebody in the upper offices, right, your front office, decides to make a grown-up decision, you're going to continue to have a problem.
So when you think about Fernando Mendoza, number one pick in the draft, or maybe it's going to be Dante Moore, but if you are Las Vegas, you have the number one pick in the draft. Let's assume that the Jets had the number one pick. Do they take Fernando Mendoza there? I mean, they got to take a quarterback, right? And then who needs Fernando Mendoza more? Is it Las Vegas, which has obviously got a lot of turnover, but they also have talent with Brock Bowers. They need somebody that can come in and be that glue guy that can make the plays and be on the rookie contract so they can spend that $100 million elsewhere. But then I think about the Jets, and if ever there was a city with the kind of pressure New York brings, if ever there was a team that has been down in the dumps and needs somebody that can come in with Fernando Mendoza's energy and positivity, it's the Jets, right? Like, to me, it seems like Las Vegas would be stupid not to take Fernando Mendoza, but the Jets couldn't be luckier than if Vegas went Dante Moore or some other direction.
If I'm being honest, both teams need to stay as far away as possible from quarterbacks this year.
Ooh, interesting.
It's just not what they need to be able to turn around the franchise. Now, do you want an elite quarterback? Yes, but your team is so many steps away from being able to plug in a quarterback and have great success. Now you're going to go out and you're going to draft a rookie. I think Mendoza is probably more prepared for the NFL than Dante Moore is, just because Mendoza has started more games. He's had that pressure of transferring, re-earning the job. You know, he's leading arguably the best team in college football right now, won the Heisman. So there's a lot of positive things about him. He's got a great maturity about him. But you're going to ask him to step in, whether that's the Jets or the Raiders, and be the absolute guy. And I don't think that that's what either of those franchises need to do right now. They need to settle down for a year or two before they even think about getting a quarterback. Maybe you can luck into a Sam Darnold-esque player. I'm not quite sure who that is right now. I don't think it's going to be a Zach Wilson or anybody like that, but you just need to find a quarterback that can get the ball around the offense. You need to hire an offensive-minded head coach, or if you hire a defensive coach, you need to absolutely ensure that they overpay for an offensive coordinator, and you need to keep the train moving. But I would just stay away from a quarterback, because you're not going to be able to foster the quarterback along in the way that you want. And if you say, oh, well, we're going to bring in the bridge quarterback and we're going to make him sit and he's going to watch and blah, blah. No, because he's not sitting and watching excellence. It's not Mahomes behind
Alex Smith.
Behind Alex Smith, right?
That's not the case. Behind Brett Favre.
Right, that's
Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers.
Right, that's not the case. So just stay away. Save the quarterback's egos. Save your draft picks. Save any sort of money and cap that you have, and build a strong team. Go out and get a bridge guy. Get yourself north of 500, and then go out and draft a quarterback.
So what you're saying is 2026 is the year to tank for Arch in 2027.
Listen, I don't really know.
That's what I hear you saying, tank for Arch.
I don't know about tanking for Arch. But goodness gracious, I got to look at that next draft class. But I don't think there's a quarterback that is so game-changing. There's not a Joe Burrow who, despite everything going on in the franchise, can save you. We thought Trevor Lawrence could kind of be a guy to do that. You see how much dysfunction ruins a quarterback. Don't ruin a quarterback. Just don't do it.
Though I will say, the stock on Fernando Mendoza is high. So if you are the Raiders, you could trade down and probably get a haul.
Trade down to get a haul.
Yeah.
Trade down to get a haul. Why not? Because why not?
Third burning topic, WWJD. What will John do? John Harbaugh is on the market. There are 7 coaching vacancies now, with the
Mhm.
Ravens included. Reportedly, he's had 7 teams reach out. So unless Ozzie Newsome broke up with him and then had second thoughts and said, well, maybe we want you to be our coach again, that 7th team is some other mystery team that still has a coach. There have been rumors that it's Miami. I've seen rumors that it could be Cincinnati, which I would get if you're Cincinnati's ownership and you've been looking across the sideline at John Harbaugh for 18 years as he has largely dominated that division. There might be a certain appeal that Zach Taylor doesn't hold for you. But where do you think John Harbaugh is going to land? He's got some pretty good options between Las Vegas, Atlanta. I've heard some people say the Giants. If you're John Harbaugh, where do you go?
You go home and you sit on the couch.
Really?
You don't take any job that anybody offers you unless it's the Ravens job, and obviously you can't have that because they just fired you. There's no situation that you can walk into where you're going to find great success if you're John Harbaugh. I don't think that there's enough coordinators out there right now for you to be able to build a great team and a great supporting cast around you. And again, you're looking at the Falcons. Okay, that's a good team. You got Arthur Blank, kind of a crazy owner. You've got a general manager that doesn't really know what they're doing. You're a special teams guy. Their offense is anemic, even though they have electric players, and their defense hasn't been very good. How are you going to solve that? Unless you hire elite guys around you. Okay, I'm taking that job out. Cardinals, I don't want to touch that job with the
No.
10-foot pole. Gannon tried it. I'm not going to touch that job. Browns, certainly not touching that job. That's a cursed franchise. Giants,
Titans?
cursed franchise. I don't want to touch that. Why would I go to the Titans? Same deal. Do you have Cam Ward? Yes. Do you have a kind of stronger culture there in terms of what Callahan was trying to do? Like they had some physicality before he ended up ultimately getting kicked to the curb. But again, there's so much rebuilding that you have to do. And I say you sit and you wait. You keep all these teams coming, and then you say, yeah, just I don't know. I'm looking. You play it up, and then you sit out, and guess what? You're still going to be a top coaching candidate next year when the
True.
Bengals job potentially opens. And I think that's one that you mentioned. I think there's an opportunity for that next year or midway through next year. They're going to fire him. I think because there's
And
no way.
in that year that he sits on the couch, he can either sit on the couch or he can go take a TV job and make a bunch of money and go get some travel in and
Yep.
do some fun stuff. So I don't hate that
But go
idea. But I
relax.
also don't hate Vegas. I don't hate Vegas for a
I
coach who's
hate
going to
Vegas.
come in and choose his quarterback. I think if Tom Brady gets more involved there, he knows how a good organization is run. I think Tom Brady was more the reason why the Patriots won all those Super Bowls than Belichick. Why not Vegas?
Vegas is, again, another one of the cursed franchises. And again, it's about building that staff around you. And you're going to be putting a lot of pressure with a new coach, which you're talking about now. If they go new coach, they're going to go get a new quarterback and they're probably going to draft a rookie. You're putting a lot of pressure on everybody coming into Vegas to turn things around day one.
But are you? Let me ask
Yes.
that question because my thinking is he comes into Vegas and he gets at least a year of grace coming into the situation that it has been over the last couple of
Did
years.
Pete Carroll get a year of grace?
No, but that was different because Pete Carroll came in and he was 94 years old. And it was like Pete Carroll they brought him in to win now. And now they're coming in and they're not pretending like Geno Smith is going to be able to come in and be a quick solve at quarterback. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think the mindset has changed and that favors John Harbaugh, but I agree with you. The second they show even a hint of promise, it's going to be like Cowboys fans. Raiders
Yeah.
fans are going to immediately think they're there. And then when they realize that that was a glimmer of promise and they're not there yet, then there's going to be a lot of pressure. And that's probably something that a John Harbaugh, like to your point, if you can go to Cincinnati in a year, Cincinnati fans have no expectations. No
Zero.
expectations.
Yeah.
Now, would you want to work for that ownership group? Maybe he's one of the few guys who would have the clout to come in and say, if you're going to hire me, I'm doing it my way. Get out of the way. And they would.
Right.
Maybe. They haven't historically.
And here's the deal. I'm going to go a little bit dark horse here. And I think this is actually, I was thinking about this a lot. So Harbaugh, he's been in Baltimore for a long, long time. Okay, you got family, you got roots there. Do you want to pack it up and go to Vegas? Probably not. You don't want to go to Arizona. I mean, down south to Georgia wouldn't be the worst thing with the Falcons.
Or
But
the
to
Giants
me,
wouldn't be the worst.
Giants wouldn't be the worst. But you know what I think would be even better? Philadelphia. If they have a, if
You
they
know how
have
I
a,
feel about Nick Sirianni.
if they get if the Eagles get upset in this first round of the playoffs by the Niners, and I don't think it would necessarily be a massive upset either. I think while the Eagles have gotten better kind of towards the end of the year, I still think that they've got a chink in their armor. If they get a little seeded out at the start of that game, things could get real scary. And if it turns into a scoring contest, watch out. Now their defense is healthier and their defense has gotten better. Fangio really did a great job progressing this defense, but goodness gracious, if they're always sick of Sirianni. They never like Sirianni.
No. Well,
So if you can go from
Andy
Baltimore,
Reid for a long time.
if you can go from Baltimore to Philly, I wouldn't hate that. So you're talking about what's that mystery 7 team that still has a coach? It could certainly be the Bengals, but the Bengals went out and announced that they're retaining him. They wouldn't do that if they kind of had some things going on the side.
But if they didn't know that John Harbaugh was going to be available, and then he comes on the market, it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen something like this happen.
But they know behind doors, closed rooms, agents are all these guys have basically the same 5 agents. All these head coaches do. They're very aware of what the situation is going to be, kind of in that in those front office areas. But I wouldn't hate that. Again, if the Eagles have a really, really bad loss, I could see them canning Sirianni and just being sick of not maximizing, even though they just came off a Super Bowl, which is crazy. It's a what have you done for me lately league. You had a blow up year when Sirianni didn't have a great staff around him. He gets another great staff around him. You win the Super Bowl. The staff this year is meh. He's proven again that he's not very offensively qualified.
He can't take over the play calling like Dan Campbell did and really change their fortunes.
It could be the Lions. You don't know.
It could be the Lions.
No,
so
I don't think it's the
Lions.
Lions.
That's another great segue into our discussion on upset alert. Who is the most likely upset candidate this weekend? And it could be the Eagles. The Eagles are 4.5-point favorites. Now, to your point on the defense, Jalen Carter, for my money, has been the difference maker on that Eagles defense. When he has not played, the Eagles defense has looked ordinary. When he has played, the way that he wrecks the running game and the way that he disrupts the pocket from the middle of the pocket, from the interior line, there are very few players who are able to do that. Very few players. We're lucky for the Ducks that Stephen Daly is not going to be playing for Indiana, because at the college level, he is one of those players that can do that. But the Eagles, 4.5-point favorites against a 49ers team that, you think about it. At first, I was a little surprised at the spread. I thought it would be 2.5 or 3.5. 4.5 pushes you towards the signal that Vegas is saying this could be a field goal game. It could easily be a touchdown game. You have to think they were looking at week 18 and saying a healthy Eagles defense and running game should be able to do what Seattle just did to San Francisco, especially at home with San Francisco coming across the country. I'm not so sure. I like the Niners in that game.
Yeah. I like the Niners to have a chance to win, and I do. It's certainly going to be a one possession game. I think they're throwing out 4.5 points just to try and get people to feel that way, but it's going to be a field goal or under, in my opinion. But yeah, what you're talking about with Jalen Carter, he's such a game wrecker in the center, but you've also got Jordan Davis. You went and you picked up Jalen Phillips, an elite pass rusher who's kind of coming back into form after rupturing that Achilles. You've still got Brandon Graham on your roster.
Brought him back mid-season, right?
Brought him back mid-season. Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith Jr., Adoree Jackson, who was one of the greatest athletes to come out of USC. Like, he's kind of finding a little bit of groove. Quinyon Mitchell is continuing to blossom. Like, there's a lot of really positive things on that defense. And again, Fangio just throughout the year has done an excellent job. And then, offensively, you get healthy. You're getting Lane Johnson back. Jordan Mailata's healthy. Cam Jurgens is back and healthy. Like, there were some things that weren't quite right on that O-line to start the year. Saquon Barkley started trying to find holes rather than feeling the holes, and his run game was off. I think he's starting to kick into a little bit of a rhythm. So they're just, the Eagles are kind of trending up right now is what I'm feeling.
You're not feeling high on a San Francisco upset.
I'm not feeling high. Okay. I'm feeling it's a potential. To me, the greatest opportunity for upset is easily Chargers over the Patriots.
Okay,
to me, that's a clear cut. Okay,
because I want to talk about that one, and I want to talk about Houston. We're going to throw out Bills Jaguars and we're going to throw out Packers Bears because those are 1.5 point lines. I am a little bit surprised that the Bills are 1.5 point favorite in Jacksonville. I think that is only a testament to Josh Allen and the history and lineage of the Bills over the last several years, but I will be betting the Jaguars in that game. I'm also a little surprised that this beaten up Packers team is a 1.5 point favorite. To your point earlier, they have no identity. I think the Packers had an identity for a while, maybe lost it a little bit, especially when they lost Rome Odunze and then they lost Luther Burden. Then Burden came back and had that huge second game against the Packers, then got hurt again. So what does their receiving core look like? As far as I understand it, there will be no Odunze in this game because he's still dealing with a broken foot. But setting those two games aside, just given where the spreads are, I'm also going to assume that you are not going to take the Panthers, who are 10.5 point underdogs to the Rams. Can we both agree that the Rams, even if they don't cover the 10.5, which is a big number on the road in the playoffs for a Rams team that has played some of these games closer than they should have been, there's no way the Panthers win this game, right?
I don't know.
It's a trick, right? Because the last 3 times a division winner has finished sub 500, 2 of them being in the NFC South, they've gone on to win their first round game. So it's hard to write them off here, but at the same time, it's also really hard for me to see Matt Stafford losing this one.
Yeah, it'd be different if the Panthers were trending up to close the year, right? But they weren't really trending. They lost 3 of their last 4. Their great winning stretch was against the Jets, the Cowboys, and the Dolphins, kind of some reeling teams. They got absolutely destroyed by the Patriots, the number 1 seed in the AFC. So they're just not a legit playoff team. And again, that playoff experience that you're going to get out of Matt Stafford and the rest of that team and Sean McVay, that coaching is just another level. Canales hasn't been in the playoffs as a head coach before, and I think you're going to see that that's going to be the big difference. And I'm not sure it's as much as the rosters and the players against each other as much as it is also that coaching matchup. I think that's almost given them a field goal at this point in the game.
Well, and is Canales going to be able to commit to Rico Dowdle in the run the way that he needs to? Because when you beat the Rams this year, you beat them by controlling the line of scrimmage. You look at how Seattle beat them and that running game finally started picking up. You look at Bijan Robinson, went for 95 yards. 93 of that was a touchdown run. But even when you strip that out, he had like 5.7 yards per carry and over 100 yards. That is the only way. Like, they're not going to beat the Rams with Tet McMillan. The Rams are going to take him out of the game. And then it's going to be a question of, can the Panthers establish the running game and then commit to it enough and get up early and then be able to pound the rock? I don't believe that they will be able to do that. I think this is going to be a Rams, call it like 31-17, 31-21 game. And it's just right in there where I wouldn't bet it because 10.5 points is precarious territory, but I do think the game the Rams are going to control.
Rams should win the game.
Okay, so you mentioned Chargers-Patriots, and I am with you. I actually think that is the biggest upset alert of the week. Drake May in his first run through the playoffs. But before we dive into that one, tell me why it's not Texans-Steelers, because I'm going to say right now, I am going to be betting the Texans on Monday night -3. I think Aaron Rodgers' career essentially comes to an end on Monday night against a vicious defense. And I think Derek Stingley's going to take DK Metcalf out of the game, and we've seen what this team looks like without DK Metcalf. To say the offense is inept is an insult, frankly, to inept offenses.
Yeah, again, you've got Arthur Smith, the football terrorist. How do I kind of go about this one? Just that pass rush is going to be relentless, right, with Will Anderson Jr. and with Daniil Hunter, and that's really going to frustrate Aaron Rodgers. And if you frustrate him early, things, as we've seen in his time in Green Bay, multiple times against San Francisco, things do not go well. He starts holding onto the ball, pointing fingers, things get frustrated. You don't even need to take DK Metcalf out of the game. He can take himself out of the game. Derek Stingley, who's played excellent, just needs to get him irritated enough, right? But here's the deal, because Aaron Rodgers knows all that, he's another guy that's seen every protection, he's seen every rush package. He can find ways to get the ball out quickly. And if Adam Thielen and him kind of catch a little bit of a groove, maybe there's a little bit more space for Metcalf, maybe there's a little bit more space for Freiermuth. If they can kind of find ways to dink and dunk and not allow Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter to be a big part of the game and really put the stress on the linebackers and the safeties and corners coming up to make plays in those short yardage areas, and that's gonna be the way they have to win the game. And they're also gonna have to win this game at very low scoring. I mean, and I don't think the Texans are necessarily here to outscore you either. They've had a tough year on offense, but they're gonna have to win this game like 13-10 if they do.
And I think if they do, it's going to be because they run Kenneth Gainwell between the tackles. I think one of the mistakes that Arthur Smith is probably going to make in this game is he's going to give too many touches to Jalen Warren. He's going to try and run him outside the tackles too much, which is what Jalen Warren does, but is not what you can do against this Houston team.
They're
if you're
too
going to
athletic.
beat them, and if you're going to give your offensive line an opportunity to protect Aaron Rodgers on passing downs, you've got to be able to get a push up the middle. I have watched too much Pittsburgh Steeler football this year, both because I have bet too much on or against Pittsburgh Steelers football, and because one of my really good friends is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and I always love to nitpick at him. But they refuse to ride Gainwell. For my money, when he has been the only back available, that offense has looked much better. But when they try and manage both backs, it's a disaster, and I don't think they're going to do a good job of that this weekend, and I think the Texans are going to eat them alive.
And I think that's likely, and I misspoke earlier. I thought for some reason the Steelers had them at home. So
They do. This is in Pittsburgh.
This is in Pittsburgh. What matchup did I just look at?
You
Where I
got them
didn't?
right.
Okay, wow, whatever bracket I was looking at was showing the Texans on the bottom for the home game. That's strange.
Oh, weird. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So again, now you got to go to Heinz Field. If
It's
you're
cold, you're an indoor team.
Yeah, that whole spiel, right? And again, CJ Stroud, playoffs, things get a little bit more intense. Mike Tomlin, say what you want about him. He does know how to game plan, and he's not just going to give the game to you. He's going to take away what you like to do. He's going to find ways to minimize, your team's best players. So, not to say anything's possible, but I just have a hard time imagining a 90-year-old Aaron Rodgers being able to avoid Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. all night.
Yeah. So between Niners and Steelers, who do you think is more likely to spring the upset?
I feel better about the Niners just because I feel better about their offense.
Yeah.
I feel better about Christian McCaffrey making plays, Juwan Jennings making plays. Although they did sustain a few more injuries to their defense. I didn't even consider that for the Niners. I'm still going to go Niners. I just trust Kyle Shanahan a little bit more to kind of outcoach his way around a Fangio defense. That's what I think.
So let's talk Chargers Patriots. This is the big game of the week. Obviously, New England just misses out on the number 1 seed, which goes to Denver. It means they've got to play in the first round. They're in Foxborough, but they're hosting a team that is maybe Texans light in terms of defense, a very good defense, if not one of the best 3 defenses in the league, but an offense that I would say is better than the Texans. They've had plenty of troubles this year on the offensive line, very, very injury riddled. They've had a lot of guys, rotate through the running back room this year, but they've got Amari Hampton now. They've got Kamari Vidal. They've got Keenan Allen, and they've got Quentin Johnson going down the field. They've got Ladd McConkey all over the field, and then they've got Gadsden at tight end. And, when I've watched Charger games this year, that dude has jumped off the screen at me. I think that the Chargers can score with New England, and I think that New England's going to put some points on the board. But I think the Chargers defense is going to be a force of much greater resistance than the Patriots defense is going to be when the Chargers have the ball. And, frankly, 3.5 was surprising. I thought this would be New England minus 2.5, 3.5. I think to your earlier point, they're putting it just high enough that people will go grab the value on the money line, and they're really hoping that it's New England by 3, and then they get the middle. But I think, there's value in Chargers plus 3.5. And, frankly, I think there's a really good chance that the Chargers just win this one outright.
I think so too. And part of it is the experience of Justin Herbert. And I know he hasn't necessarily had the world's best playoff record. But again, when you talk about teams that have identities, both the Chargers and the Patriots are teams that have identities. They're physical downhill teams. I just trust Justin Herbert to be more talented than Drake May when it matters. Now, I know that Drake May has played excellent this year against a much weaker schedule, but Justin Herbert, man, I and maybe this is the duck homer coming out of me. I just have faith that he's going to have the ability to make plays. And so much of this offense this year has been hampered by the unhealthiness of that running back room, has been hampered by the unhealthiness of that offensive line, of Keenan Allen missing a couple games, Quentin Johnson in and out with his ankle, missing a bunch of games. Yeah. And so they just never really got things right. And so I think that this is their opportunity to kind of put it all together, trending in the right direction towards the end of the season. And yeah, their defense, if you wanted to say their offenses are equal, you could say that. I do think the Patriots offense is going to be a little bit more effective, right? And that's looking at the course of the year. But the impact, like you already mentioned, is going to be the defense. That Patriots defense to me is a little shaky. We saw that against the Bills. They can give up a lot of points in a hurry. And I just don't think that the Chargers defense with Jesse Minter are going to give up those kind of points.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the biggest factor.
Tend to agree. All right, last topic of the day. Let's switch gears a little bit. As we mentioned at the top, we've got the college football playoff. It kicks off tomorrow with Miami and Ole Miss. I think that's going to be a really exciting game. I wrote in my blog this week that I think that matchup boils down to two players who happen to be playing a cat and mouse game amongst the two of them in this one, and that is Trinidad Chambly and it is Ruben Bain Jr. And the question for me is Ruben Bain going to be able to get his hands on Trinidad Chambly? I have no doubt that he's going to be able to break through the line. He is a true game-wrecking edge rusher. But Trinidad Chambly is not every other quarterback they've seen this year. He is the most talented quarterback that they have faced. And he has an ability, I think, like Josh Allen light. He can move around in the pocket. He can bootleg and buy time and make throws on the run. And then he can also escape. And he can run for 40, 50, 60 yards and a touchdown. So, I am really big on Trinidad Chambly in this game and his ability to get points. And then the question is, can Mario Cristobal find it within himself to put the ball in Carson Beck's hands and let the passing game complement Mark Fletcher? I'm not so sure that he's going to do that. So, I think I think 3.5 is a very generous spread for Miami. I like Ole Miss in this game. I like Ole Miss to win it straight up. I think there's a little bit of a Ewing factor with Ewing theory factor going back to Bill Simmons. With no Lane Kiffin. Look, the offense doesn't seem to have missed a beat. It seems like they're a very galvanized group, and so I'm leaning Ole Miss. Which way are you leaning in that one?
I'm leaning Ole Miss simply because I can't stand Mario Cristobal. I also like more than Chambly. Like Chambly, his ability to extend plays is what makes him dangerous. And that's what makes quarterbacks dangerous at the college level. You might not end up being great at the NFL, but if you can frustrate a college defense simply by just staying alive and then making a heave to your best player, that's going to make you really, really hard to beat. That's something that Carson Beck can't do. If the run game isn't going with Fletcher, if Malachi Toney isn't in enough space to make plays and be a game changer, you're going to have some serious problems. I love Ole Miss running back Lacey.
Kawan Lacey.
Kawan Lacey.
He's the best running back in the SEC.
He's an absolute monster, right? And I think that he is going to have an impact against this Miami defense, who's been excellent this year. I think Nick Saban even said it on one of the college football game days. He said, hey, watch out for this Miami team and their defense. If you have to worry about Chambly going out the back door, this is entirely different than all of the ACC offenses that you've played this year. It's different than Julian saying in Ohio State, who can't move out of the pocket at all. It's different than, I can't even remember who their first round matchup was.
It was Texas A&M and Marcel Reed. And we didn't even see good Marcel Reed. Like the Marcel Reed we saw earlier in the year probably is the closest analog to what they're going to see in Trinidad Chambly. But Marcel Reed was a raw athlete who chucked the ball down the field several times. Trinidad Chambly is a very different animal. He is polished in a way that Marcel Reed wasn't. And again, that was good Marcel Reed. We saw bad Marcel Reed, which was not really too much of a challenge for the Miami defense.
And say what you want, Chambly's been through a playoff gauntlet, winning the D2, and I don't know how much experience that counts for, but he knows what it feels like to go through this kind of process. Prepare for the next game, prepare for the next
Win or
game,
go
stay
home.
focused on this week, win or go home. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. And when you've got a team that's galvanized because screw you, Lane Kiffin, we're gonna make this thing work. I think that's another added element. But if that Miami defense shows up the way that they have, because again, say what you want about Julian saying not performing well, they still shut down one of the most scary offenses in
They
college
did.
football. And if that defense can show up, I think the game's going to be closer. But the closer it gets, the more I trust Chambly to make that game breaking, back breaking play. 4th and 3, you need to go get a field goal to win the game. And he makes the conversion. Now you get past half field, makes another play. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think is going to win this game. And again, that Carson Beck can't do. And because you have to get the ball into the hands of playmakers, that's just an added step that I think is going to ultimately cause them to fall short.
Well, Carson Beck just doesn't have the receivers. Like, I appreciate what Malachi Tony has done, but he's not a big guy, and he
He's a
reminds me of
D'Anthony Thomas
D'Anthony
light.
Thomas. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
there
D'Anthony
it
Thomas
is.
light, bro. Yes, exactly. I'm trying to remember what the kid was after D'Anthony Thomas, who was D'Anthony Thomas light for the Ducks.
Charles Nelson.
Charles Nelson. Yes, exactly. That's what he reminds me of. He's not going to go across the middle. He's not going to take big shots. If he gets downfield, he's not going to win 50-50 balls. You're going to have to place it really well. And I just don't see Carson Beck doing that. I think, Ohio State was able to shut him down, and I'm not sure that Ole Miss has the defense to shut him down, but I also think Ole Miss's offense is going to come out wide open. Whereas, this Ohio State team, even having Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, you knew that they wanted to run the ball, and then they would take shots when they had to. Trinidad Champley is going to take shots whenever the freaking hell he wants to. And that's going to put a different type of pressure on the Miami defense because they're going to be looking over their shoulders all game. I think it's going to be a really exciting game.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting game. And again, Chambly only has 3 picks on the year, so he doesn't necessarily give the ball up. But now I keep teetering back and forth here. Is he going to give one up in this game? Is he going to try a little bit too hard to make that extra play, get stripped from behind, or cough one up trying to break an extra tackle getting down the field? Those are the kind of things you have to look at as well that can completely change the momentum of the game.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears again a little bit. We're going to stay in college football. Before we get to Oregon, Indiana, though, I want to talk about an NIL story that came up today. We talked about it a little bit before we jumped on and started recording. It's the story about Damon Williams, the University of Washington quarterback, who signed a deal in the mid $4 million range to come back to Washington this year. And now apparently he has put on social media that he's entering the portal, didn't tell anybody. The University of Washington has said that they are going to enforce that contract to the letter of the law as much as they can. And it sounds like he's been lured away by none other than Lane Kiffin at LSU. Obviously there's been a lot of change in college football with the introduction of NIL, and we're going to talk about what the impact is to the actual playoff right now because Oregon lost 13 players to the transfer portal this last week, and that was unprecedented. But what do you think is going to happen with Damon Williams? Do you think he goes back to Washington? Do you think Washington lets him out? Does he pay his way out of that? Does somebody else pay his way out of that? What happens here?
I think that the NCAA, despite everything that they've done to try to be hands off, has to step in here and enforce his contract. Because if you don't, now even signing an NIL contract doesn't matter. At first, it's tough because you get guys just for 1 year, right? It's free agency every single offseason. It's free agency in the middle of the season. Guys can just hit the portal anytime they want. But if you open the door to somebody being able to sign a contract and say, never mind, a couple days later and try and enter the portal, you are opening up like this can of worms
Pandora's
that's already...
box.
Yeah, it's not even Pandora's box anymore. It's Pandora's box, and you open it, and it's full of worms. It's like a rotten version of Pandora's box. It is going to cause so many more problems. I think that, again, the NCAA has to step in this case in particular. Otherwise, there's just no point. And you might as well just go back to paying people secretly.
Is it the conferences? This is the thing that I think is really unclear right now. Who is it?
But it has to be the NCAA. It has to be because they're the ones who have been working to build this framework for a number of years. they failed to build it correctly, and they let everything go. This is one of the points where they have to draw the line. I think we talked about it the last time we were on the show. Is like, where do you draw the line? Or maybe we were talking about it offline, but at what point do you say, okay, you can't do XYZ things. You can only pay players this much money. Like, where's that line drawn? This, I think, is the first hard line that they can draw so that they can at least start going back in the other direction. Because right now, everything's just flying. And if you don't draw a line in the stand somewhere, you're screwed. And this, again, this
100%.
has to be the first place that they draw the line in the sand. Otherwise, they're never going to have control over the situation. And at that point, NCAA just needs to disband, hire a commissioner, and you're just a baby NFL.
Yes. And, I've harped on the NCAA has a lot of work to do in this offseason to adjust the college football playoff and the seeding committee, go to 16 teams, all of that. I would be fine with them putting that on hold. If they solve this situation, then they go solve the transfer portal timing situation that has put Oregon in such a bad spot. It honestly reminds me the nonsense of the fact that Oregon has 13 players that have left, including Jaden Lamar, and we get news the same day that Jordan Davison, our star freshman running back, the best running back that we have at this point, has broken his collarbone. He's out for the rest of the season. That same day, we also find out that Malachi Hughes, who came to Oregon from Tulane, was an All-American Conference first-team player last year, never found his footing at Oregon. He decided to redshirt halfway through the season. But in the old world, if somebody had decided to redshirt halfway through the season and then you needed them to win the national championship, you burn the freaking red shirt. You don't have that player leave the team and no longer suit up for you. And then to have your third string running back who actually got reps and is a good player in Jaden Lamar leave, it is beyond me. And now we are left with Noah Whittington, who has always been the bridesmaid, never the bride. He was the backup to Jordan James. He was the backup to Bucky Irving. He's always been the backup because he's not that good. He's not a bad running back, but he doesn't have top-end speed, doesn't have the ability to break many tackles. He's not who you want starting the game. De'Aaron Hill Jr. is more of a change of pace back. He's got a lot of lightning in him, but that lightning gets unbottled when you have thunder running into the line. And what are you going to do when you're in a 4th and 1 situation? You can't unleash Davison. What are you going to do when you can't run him over the goal line in a 3rd or 4th and goal situation? You're down to just 2 running backs, and it doesn't have to be this way. Miami lost, I want to say, 8 players. Ole Miss lost 3. Austin Simmons, their backup quarterback who started the year and then got supplanted by Trinidad. And then they lost 2 players that didn't see the field at all. And to nobody's surprise whatsoever, Indiana has lost nobody. They've just brought in a bunch of dudes. So Oregon is being disproportionately impacted. And it reminds me of 2014 when the Ducks made the national championship against Ohio State. And that game was played in the second week of January, and Ohio State had not started their semester-based schedule yet for winter term or spring term. And Oregon, on quarters, had started their term. So Oregon was only allowed to practice for 20 hours that week. Ohio State, under NCAA rules, had no practice limitations. Oregon was subjected to a drug test, a random drug test that ended up popping Darren Carrington and costing us our second of our 2 star receivers after Devin Allen tore his knee on the opening kickoff of the Rose Bowl. What about Ohio State? Well, they didn't get drug tested because their semester hadn't started yet. Like, the insanity that exists in NCAA collegiate sports blows my freaking mind, and we're seeing it again right here. Why is this allowed?
It shouldn't be
Rant
allowed.
over. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
And it shouldn't be allowed. I think that there needs to be a reevaluation of not just players in the transfer portal, but coaches. Again, you've got Lane Kiffin, a guy who got his team to the college football playoff, splitting, not even coaching the team, and he takes a job at LSU. And I understand the coaching cycle, right? I understand the coaching cycle, right? Like, you got to get in before all the jobs get taken. But to me,
it is prepare for the portal and the high schoolers.
Right, and you've got the early signing day period, and you've got the spring signing, or like the official signing day period. Like, they just need to get a grip on when you can and can't enter the portal, because what you're, again, along with the money in the contracts and getting in and out of contracts without having any sort of implications, like leaving and cutting a team short after you've been there the entire year just because you're unhappy. What are you teaching young men? Number one, like, not to put my old dad hat on, but like, what are you teaching young men that you can just cut your losses and go and transfer? And part of that thing, and this all goes back to the money. If I'm Jaden Lamar, And there's only 4 teams that are still playing college football right now. Everyone else, every other coach, they're hot on the recruiting trail. They're trying to bolster their class right now. I'm hitting because otherwise the money's going to run out. If I don't hit the portal right now, my opportunity to get money coming from the University of Oregon being kind of one of the lead backs and having some injury this year, like if I'm going to get my money, I have to go now. If I
Yep.
want somebody to pay me, I have to go now. And because of that pressure that the early signing period puts on, that NIL and the transfer portal, like all these different little elements that go into the chaos that is the NCAA, it creates such a problem. And I
Well,
don't blame Lamar.
I don't
I
either.
mean, I do blame Lamar, but he's all these young kids right now are a victim to the circumstances. And the coaches perpetuate the problem because now you can't say, oh, well, Lane Kiffin just left. Why can't Jaden Lamar? I'm like, both are wrong.
Yeah.
Both are
Well,
not
and
okay.
you hit on something that's really important. No matter the age, people are incentive driven creatures. And we've created an incentive structure that is causing perverse decisions. And the only people that can change it are the powers that be in the NCAA. And they've
Yeah.
got to change it this offseason. I would deal with another year of this 12-team playoff, even if we had 3 group of 5 teams next year. I would accept that if they fix this. Okay.
Yeah.
Nate,
It,
go
yeah.
ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah.
Okay. So where do you fall on this Oregon-Indiana game? We're not going to have Jane Lamar. We're not going to have Jordan Davison. Obviously, the last time we played Indiana, the running game had 20 carries for 101 yards, but 8 of those carries and 59 yards were Davison, including 1 run for 26 yards. When you strip all of that away, didn't look very good. The receiving room has gotten healthier, but there will be no Evan Stewart. We really didn't see a rounding into form from DeCorian Moore and Gary Bryant Jr. So I can't say that my hopes were realized that over the last few weeks of the season, they would get back in the lineup and then get back to game shape. What does Dante Moore, assuming the Oregon defense plays well, they're not going to shut out Indiana. Indiana's too good. Assuming the defense brings their A game, what does Dante Moore need to do in this game for the Ducks to get a win?
Dante Moore needs to minimize the impact of the trenches, right? Because we know that the Oregon Duck offensive line can run the football, but they can't pass protect for anything, right? And part of that, I think, is the inexperience. And this is, I think, the difference you see between a guy like Bo Nix and Dante Moore. Bo Nix, all of his starts, I think that he got us into more protections and protected himself better than any quarterback in recent memory. Now you go to Dante Moore, maybe doesn't quite see things the same way, isn't setting himself up for success when dropping back to pass. I think part of that too is he can recognize, he knows when a blitz is coming, but he may not know exactly where it's coming from. He can recognize that pressure it's coming. He can count it correctly, but he's not, okay, I got to replace the blitzer.
Or I've seen enough tape that this
I
guy's going to drop out and this guy's actually going to come because that's what they do in these situations.
Where do you go? And I think that's going to be the big thing is, can he handle the blitz? That's the only thing. Can he handle those high pressure situations where they're sending more than 4? I think Indiana has the capability to get there with 4. They've got some serious dudes in that front 7. But he has to be able to know where to go with the football. And I think the second thing, and it's arguably more important, he has to cut the ball loose early and often.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want to see him tucking the ball, looking scared to make a mistake early in this game, because there is enough wide receiver talent and he has enough arm talent to put the ball only where his receiver can catch it. And I know DeCorian Moore's not 100% healthy. I know the same thing for Gary Bryant Jr., but we have seen the Oregon wide receivers below them, whether that's Benson or McClellan, step up. So just cut that ball loose. And now when it comes to the run game, I think he's going to have to keep it once or twice when they don't expect it. And I know his hamstring, for some reason, never looks healthy when he's running, but I don't need him to get 15. I need him to get 4 and to keep that D-line honest. And again, honestly, I don't mind having 2 backs. Why have the Ducks this year with Will Stein always been running 5 different running backs every single game?
Because if you were telling me it was Davison and Hill, I wouldn't mind having 2 backs as much as I mind having 2 backs with Whittington and Hill.
Yeah, no doubt, right? Because then you have that true lightning and thunder. But my deal here is, okay, now you have the opportunity to get more carries to 2 backs. Okay, so you have the opportunity to get into a rhythm and less packages or less opportunities for the defense to know the package. Okay, Davidson's in. Okay, they run 3 plays. Lamar was in. Okay, they run 3 plays. And that completely changes what the defense is looking at. Okay, now it's two running backs, two different or multitude of different formations. There's going to be more for them to be looking at than just, oh, okay, he's in. These are the plays that they run when he is in. It
That's
changes
true.
the preparation for everybody. Now, I think Hill, he's a rookie, if you will, right? The freshman, he's a guy who doesn't have scars on him. I think that he's going to have an excellent game. I think he's just going to be out there running on complete instinct and juice. Like, hey, I probably wasn't supposed to get more than one carry, maybe two this game, a few gadget plays. I'm getting a chance to go rock
15.
out.
Yeah.
It's on. I love it. And then for Whittington, I just think he needs to bring experience and not cough up the football. And as long as those two things happen, I'd be scared for Indiana to play the Ducks twice. Because first of all, in Eugene, Indiana did not get the Ducks' best game the first time around. And that scoreline got up to 30-20. The Ducks' offense couldn't really get going, and they just started chasing things. Right.
And then
that, right. You
and
start chasing things,
that Brandon Finney pick
wheels
that
kind of fall off.
2020.
Right, exactly. And so I expect the offense better play better the second time around, or just not put the defense on the field so much to where that Indiana offense really starts to get churning. And that's what you saw against Bama. Now, Bama was, not the historic Bama.
Very one-dimensional team. Even a two-back Oregon team is going to be much more multi-dimensional than Bama, especially when you consider Jamari Johnson and Kenyon Sadiq. Like, you have that tight end room that is just lethal.
Yeah, and I'll flip it to the side of Indiana here. I don't know how you beat them. They're a B+ everywhere. I don't think that they're an A+ anywhere other than maybe their front seven or an A anywhere other than their front seven on defense. But they're a CPMG accountant of a program. They are just clinical. They don't do anything fancy. It's power left, power right, counter, inside zone, outside zone. Take shots one-on-one. Mendoza has such a great feel with his wide receivers. Like, they don't do anything shocking, and they won't. But they are just so good and so efficient at what they do. It gets frustrating when you're like, I cannot stop them running to the right. They keep doing it. I cannot stop this back shoulder fade ball. They keep doing it, and that's really frustrating.
And that's what I worry about. I hear you on the B+ all over the place. I think they have an A+ linebacker in Aiden Fisher. And I think he is going to be an NFL linebacker. And I think that is really key on defense, especially not having Stephen Daly, who is an A+ defensive tackle. On offense, I think they have two B+ running backs in Hemby and Kalen Black, and I think that's going to be really hard. To your point, they just
Hemby,
run right
yes,
down.
Kalen Black. I don't really think. I think Hemby gets the benefit of. I'm sorry, Black gets the benefit of Hemby wearing teams down.
100% agree, but he is the type of back that when Hemby is wearing you down, Kalen Black comes in and keeps grinding you and has the ability to break a long run. But where I think the real advantage is in Omar Cooper Jr. and then Elijah Surratt on the other side. They are like Chad Johnson and TJ Hushmanzada to me. They are so freaking
really
good. Yeah, dude. Omar Cooper Jr. is 6'4". He has that big body. I don't know if he has the speed to play wide receiver 1 in the NFL, but he does in college. And Elijah Surratt is one of those guys that he is everywhere. And then you have their third wide receiver, Charlie Becker, who reminds me of Eric Decker, maybe because Becker and Decker rhyme, maybe because they're both tall, lanky, fast, white wide receivers. I'm not really sure why.
Decker had some mass to him, though. Decker was a bigger dude.
Well, and Becker can make big plays. He's a big frame wide. He's like 6'4". So, I don't know. I look at that Indiana passing attack and I think we better shut down the run so that we can shift into a nickel and better handle the passing attack, because if we're in a base defense, their receivers are going to make life really hard for us.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And they did that in our last matchup. And again, it's never, we're not going to get torched for, 300 yards passing by Mendoza, but it's going to be the most frustrating 175 yards passing you've ever experienced. And they're almost always explosive plays.
And what are we going to get from Dante? When you look at Dante this year, Dante has had a bunch of really tough games against good defenses. That's what worries me, is he's got to play the best game that he's played all year long. And is he going to be able to do that? I'm not entirely sure. When you look at the Iowa game, he really struggled against Iowa. When you look at the Wisconsin game, Wisconsin played much better against Oregon than we expected. He struggled against Wisconsin. He has just struggled, even against Penn State. When Oregon took that 17-3 lead, you thought, okay, Dante Moore and the boys are going to put this away, and then he couldn't keep it going down the stretch. So I just worry about that. And then, of course, we've talked ad nauseum about the 2 interceptions against James Madison. He obviously had a bunch of mistakes against Texas Tech. I hope like hell. I bleed green and yellow just like you do. I hope like hell he brings his A game and he plays a clean game, no turnovers, because I think that's what it's going to take this week.
Yeah,
and even then, I think Indiana's a generational team, and my money is on Indiana to win the national championship.
I'll give Dante Moore 1 turnover. I'll give him 1. It's a national championship. You're against a great defense. Same deal with Mendoza. Each of them's probably going to turn over the ball at least once. These are great defenses, but it cannot be in the red zone. Dante Moore has given the ball up too many times in the red zone. And if you do that against Indiana, not only are you giving up the possession, but you are giving up critical points. And I know that sounds like day one install kind of stuff, but you are wasting plays on offense, filling empty stats. You're going to go to the box, we're like, oh, well, we score. We had just as much offense, and we did. That's what happens.
Yep.
When you throw those red zone. So it cannot be in the red zone. We will not be able to overcome a red zone turnover.
Completely agree. It's going to be interesting to see. Friday night, it all goes down, and we will have our answer. I've already booked my tickets to Miami for the national championship. You actually just slipped a little bit, and you said this is the national championship game, and I actually agree with you. This is the de facto national championship.
No doubt.
If Oregon gets through this, whether it's Miami or Ole Miss, I think Oregon is going to be a favorite in Vegas, and I think they'll win. Same with Indiana. I'm really excited for this one, and I hope the Ducks pull it out. And I'm in Miami on January 19th. Watching the Ducks win their first ever national championship. I was in the building for the first 2, obviously left with great disappointment after the Auburn game. Went into the game with great disappointment against Ohio State, just knowing that Ohio State wasn't going to have to play 2 high safeties like everybody did against Darren Carrington and Devin Allen and Charles Nelson and Dwayne Standiford. Oh, and by the way, Royce Freeman in the backfield. So that was a tough one. But, man, if we can get past Indiana, it's ours.
I couldn't agree more. It's just going to take Oregon's best game of the year. Again, another cliche thing to say, but it's going to take not even best game, most complete game.
Yes.
And I'll leave it at that.
Agreed. All right, Nate, thank you so much for the time. 5 burning topics. We got through all of them. Your perspective and insights are deeply appreciated. I hope you have a great week. I hope everybody has a great week and enjoys all of the incredible football we have ahead.
Amen. See you later.
Cheers.